I get a lot of questions about the Lateral Transfer Redesignation Board, and so I wanted to put together a quick presentation to talk about the process. Most people know that the board is held twice per year, once in June and once in November. The Lateral Transfer Board allows for flexibility between communities that need more or less officers in a particular year group, and it's the main way that communities use to supplement their shortfalls within particular year groups. It's important to note that the Lateral Transfer Board is not a buffet-style process. That is to say, the board members don't simply just lay the applications out on a table and pick the ones that they like the best. There's some math and process involved, and so I'll try to discuss some of the nuance here. The key takeaway from this slide is that the strength of an officer's application is not necessarily the sole determining factor in their selection or non-selection for lateral transfer. So we'll step through some questions here. The first one is, how many quotas out does a designator have? And the answer is that it varies by designator and further by year group. The number of quotas out is related to the number of officers in a year group versus the number of officers that are needed in that year group. And it's also related to community milestone needs. That it's possible that there may be more applications out than there are quotas out in a particular year group and designator, so it's important to talk to your community manager well before the board to determine if there will be quotas out for your year group. The next question is, how many quotas in does a designator have? And again, that answer varies by designator and again by year group, and it's mostly driven by the number of officers in a year group versus the need. Again, it's possible that there may be more applications in than there are quotas in, and so it's important to talk to your prospective community manager to determine if there will be quotas in for your year group. So the next question is, what about the quota out and quota in matchup? The losing designator has to have quotas out in the specific year group that match the gaining designator's quotas in for that year group. So if there's no quota in, the quota out doesn't match up. I know that seems intuitive, but we're going to talk in a moment about community prioritization, and so these things together can be a major factor that determines selection versus non-selection. So the next question is, well, what priority is the designator or the community that I'm applying for? There's a process that takes place in the weeks prior to each board. Year groups are put into bands so that you can prioritize the communities that have the greatest need based on their shortfall which in each band. For example, Band 1 would be Lieutenant Junior Grade, Band 2 would be Junior Lieutenant, Band 3 would be Senior Lieutenant and Junior Lieutenant Commander, and Band 4 would be Lieutenant Commander and above. So within each one of those year group bands, the communities are prioritized based on the greatest need, and that need is determined by comparing the designator's number of officers they have in a year group versus how many they need in that year group. After that prioritization takes place, then the top 6 usually get the first portion of the total quotas out for that band. So in other words, those top 6 communities step up to the podium and make their picks until that first portion is used up. The communities that are not in the top 6 then get to step up, and as long as they have quotas in that match quotas out, they can make selections. It's important to know that each year group band will likely have a different top 6. So a different prioritization scheme for each one of those bands. If the community you're trying to get into is not in the top 6 for your year group band, then your community's quotas out could be spoken for before your desired community gets to select. So in other words, we have a quota mismatch, and that is a major factor for selection versus non-selection. So begs the question, well, how do I know if the designator that I'm trying to get into is in the top 6 for my year group band? And unfortunately the answer is you'll likely not know, because that designator prioritization takes place after the application deadline. So there's some other key takeaways about the lateral transfer process. Number one, it's very important to have strong performance in your current designator. And if you don't get selected on a particular board and you still want a lateral transfer, keep applying. It's important to also continue to keep performing well in your parent community. And number 3, timing is very important. The reason that timing is so important is that when you lateral transfer into a new community, you need enough time to get observed fit reps and break out in that community so that you remain competitive for promotion. So as a way to summarize, the dark blue puck here represents the application, and the little funnel represents the piece of the process. So we talked about the need to have quotas out in your parent designator. Additionally, we have to consider the community's year group band priority. and then there has to be a matchup with the inbound community's quotas in, and then the application gets to compete against others head to head for selection into that community, and then you have the board results on the other end. So I hope this short video has helped kind of explain the process for lateral transfer.